It really has become kind of overwhelming in my life anyways, that everybody is really concerned about what's going to happen with the election. But anyhow, I wanted to talk a little bit. This isn't in my sermon, this isn't anything I planned, but I wanted to talk a little bit about our morning. We got an extra hour of sleep last night, and we got up early because we didn't need that extra hour. We had plenty of time to get ready for church. You should never think that. We had a struggle this morning. Everything we did just seemed like wasn't going well. Really not going wrong. It's just the clock was moving faster than our feet were, I think. And then as we was getting ready to leave, I don't mean to tattle on my wife or anything, but she spilled her tea. And then she spilled her tea again. We were in the house, out of the house, in the house, out of the house. But the whole time we were laughing. Everything that went wrong, I don't mean to brag us up or anything. We don't always do that. Sometimes things go wrong, you're not really laughing. But yeah, we were just having a good time, laughing. Amber laughed almost the whole way here. She had to check her makeup because she thought usually it comes off because she's crying. But she was laughing so hard that, that's really how it just was making me, as she was laughing, I was off in thought. That's how everything should be. When you're having a hard time, it doesn't always have to be so difficult. It's in my message, but I'm going to say it now. My professor this week spoke about we are 99% emotional and 1% rational. When you are having a hard time or anything's going on, our bodies are made up to react with 99% emotion, 1% rational. We need to really think of that when the rational part of us is trying to think of God. The emotional part of us is thinking about what's going on around us. We need to try to really concentrate on the 1% that will think of God. But my message is entitled, Lift Up Your Eyes. There are 4 life-changing words. Lift up your eyes. There are times in life when lifting up our eyes can be easy, and there's times that it can be hard. We have all heard the saying, or I've even preached on it, to just walk with your head held high. In the Bible, it talks about lifting up your eyes, and we need to really think about when we're feeling down, to lift your head up, walk high, lift your eyes towards heaven. And during this time of year, I am going to talk about the election today. Nothing too much, but every 4 years, we get a chance to elect a new president. We get a chance to vote on who we think might best be suited to run our country. We get a chance to hear speeches about how each candidate plans to help our country. And it's the time of year when the 2 candidates can speak hope and encouragement into the future of our nation. It would be nice if that were the case, wouldn't it? To just hear their hopes for the future. It seems we hear more arguing and bullying than anything else, though. Ain't that right? It seems that way anyways. I hate to say 100% that's how it is when not everybody sees things the same way. The idea of hope and being encouraged shouldn't just be the responsibility of the church. The idea of looking at things with a positive attitude should come naturally to everyone. Positive feelings like hope, love, happiness, amusement, confidence, enthusiasm, kindness, admiration, optimism, and pride. These are things that should be on the minds of people when we think of electing a new president. Our future should be full of positive feelings. This past week, after talking to Amber, I was on my way home from work. I decided that I just wasn't going to listen to the news anymore. I had basically, as people say, it had heard enough. And I decided to just shut off my radio. We don't have cable, So I listened to the radio. I didn't shut off my radio, I just turned it from the news. I put on a playlist and listened to Jesus music. I can't believe that in a nation as great as ours, there is so much negativity surrounding the election. The news and those around the news spend so much time telling us what's wrong with everything. And yes, I mean everything. That they suck the hope right out of what could be our bright future. Even though there is negativity going on, like this morning, spilling your tea. There's good. We laughed. The news themselves want to say that the candidates are so negative. They don't have to report on that. They can report on something good. Why isn't there more time spent on building a bright future instead of spending so much time living in a nation that is divided and confused? We live in a very blessed nation. We have rights and freedoms that a lot of people around the world don't have. So why is it that we have so many people in this great nation of ours that need to be encouraged to walk with their head up, to lift their eyes and be excited about the future? The reason we struggle so much with the idea of a bright future is because God is not discussed enough when we are making plans for the future of our country. Honestly, God is probably not discussed at all when it comes to the future of this country. How does it feel to think that God is excluded from discussion about the future of this country? It's a pretty sickening feeling, isn't it? This week in class, my professor talked about when they first took prayer out of the school. Different people in the class talked about, they remember the principal saying a prayer during the announcements, or when the 10 Commandments got taken out of school. One guy said he went to a public school and the principal did a devotion every morning before school and then prayed. God is not involved in our country, not in our schools. Psalms 121, 1 and 2. Lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. We need to lift our eyes for help. So many things are beyond our control. There is a limit to our human ability. They say it over and over and over again. Your vote counts. I believe that. But I wish I could cast my vote for putting God back into our discussion about the future of our country. The church needs help. We need to be guided safely through the days ahead. If God was included in the daily discussion of our country, our help would come from the Lord. Christian love must be our daily experience. And that experience should start at the top. We cannot afford the luxury of division. We must find and do the will of God. The will of God is one thing. God is not divided. Let me say that again. The will of God is one thing. The will of God is not divided. As a country, we shouldn't argue as though we are divided. Apart from our country, we are in need of help as individuals also. It is through prayer that we enlist God's help. During my classes this week, something very interesting came up to me, and this is the part about the 99% emotion. When faced with a situation, we respond with 99% emotion and 1% reason. My professor said it like this: our reasoning is a speck in an ocean of emotion. He said, imagine the Atlantic Ocean, and there's just one speck of a leaf or something in there. Just one speck of something floating in the ocean. That is our reason compared to our emotion. If the question is something easy, then a big deal. If the question is something easy, then no big deal of our emotion take control. I don't think I said that right. Okay, just say that a friend of yours wants to cut in line at the water fountain. And it's a short line. There's like one person in front of you. You let them cut in line, get the drink, and go on about the day. There's not much emotion or anything in that decision. You just kind of, no big deal. But say someone's coming, say you waited in line at a light, the light changed 3 different times by the time you got to go through, and everybody goes right at this light. Everybody knows you're going to turn right. So you have a guy who just comes flying up through and tries to squeeze in front of you. Instead of waiting in line at the light like everybody else, he squeezes in front of you. Your emotion there might be a little bit different than letting someone cut in front of you in line. But it's at those moments that we really need to not let our emotion have control. Because the person in that car might need you to have some reason. That person in that car might be thinking, or they might need you to pray for them. Something could be going on in their lives. They may be on their way rushing home for a reason. They could be rushing to the hospital. We don't know why that person might have to rush through the light and cut you off to get through. Our emotion just automatically thinks, you idiot. We need to not always think that they're just being selfish. John 4:35. Don't you have a saying? It's still 4 months until harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. We need to lift up our eyes to the harvest. Earlier in this chapter, earlier in John chapter 4, Jesus had been drawing an analogy between the spiritual food of serving God and the physical food which refreshes the body. Here he is comparing the work of evangelism to that of collecting crops. He is saying, lift up your eyes. That guy in the car that just cut you off, he needs you. We need to find that speck of reasoning that is in our inner ocean of emotion and tie it down to an anchor. That way when you need it, you can find it. That anchor, though, should be God. When you need to find a speck of reasoning, when your emotions are... I honestly used to carry a little, it was a mustard seed inside of a little white piece of stuff. I don't know, but I carried that in my, it was just a little mustard seed. I carried it in my pocket. There's a guy that I know, he carries every Sunday, a prayer request will come up at church. He'll write the prayer request down and he puts it in his pocket. When something gets him riled up, he'll put his hand in his pocket and he starts praying for that person. Instead of letting something get him all worked up, he'll pray for somebody else. That's something we need. You need to put your little speck of reasoning on an anchor, like a note in your pocket, so that when you need to be drawn to God, you'll have that. Not only is this time to pick a president, but as Mary Beth and Jim can tell you, it's harvest time. Very busy time. It's a favorite time of year for a lot of people. Here's a quote about fall. Fall, bright flame before winter's deadness. Harvest orange, gold, and amber. Cold nights and the smell of fire. Our tree-lined streets are set ablaze, our kitchens filled with the smells of nostalgia, apples bubbling into sauce, roasting squash, cinnamon, nutmeg, cider, warmth itself. The leaves as they spark into wild color just before they die are the world's oldest performance art, and everything we see is celebrating one last violently hued hurrah before the black and white and silence of winter. Fall is begging for us to dance and sing and write with just the same drama and blaze. Now, I spent a big portion of my preparing for this message reading quotes and poems this week, so I just love to look up stuff like that and read stuff like that. Who would have thought that the end of things could be so beautiful? Trees are dying, but in a beautiful way. Fields that took all spring to plant and all summer to grow are being cut down. but the idea of a good harvest encourages us and brings a smile. Apples are ripening and falling from the tree, but they smell so sweet. God really knew what he was doing when he made fall the transforming period from summer to winter. It's the same thing for people. Jesus drawing an analogy between the harvest of crops and the harvest of souls is a perfect way to help us understand. When someone gives their life to Christ, the old man or woman dies and is reborn as a man or woman of God. The beginning of life with Christ is the end of an old life. What Jesus is saying is that the world is our fields and vineyards, and the people are the crops. It's time for the church to start harvesting. It's a beautiful thing. Everybody loves fall. We love the colors. We love the smell of apples and everything that was just said right there. We love all of that. Someone coming to Christ is more beautiful than what we are seeing happening right now. Luke 21:28. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. We need to lift up our eyes for his coming. Consider the present condition of the earth and the many signs now in the world for his return. I briefly looked into it. I don't really want to focus on this too much today, but there are around 100 Bible verses about the last days. I think it's a pretty sure assumption that it's something God wanted us to pay attention to. As long as I can remember, Christians have been saying they feel we are in the last days. Even in the Bible, it says the end is near. They talk about the end is near, even in the Bible. And it is said a lot since I've been in church. People say that the end is near. Imagine people living to be 100 years old. Seems like a long life to me, but compared to eternity, it's a pretty short amount of time. I don't know for how many years the end times may last. But if Christians are right, and we've been living in the last days for a while now, then I think it's safe to say that the last days will last longer than what we might think. Longer than one person's lifetime anyways. So in reality, each individual person may not live to see the end of the world, but we still need to share Jesus with others throughout our lifetime before the end of our days or the days of our loved ones. So you might think it's the end times. We talk about the end times a lot. The end times is here for each one of us individually, because we only live so many years on this earth. We only have so many years that we can use to affect other people with Jesus. We can't control what happens after death, so we need to do what we can now to help mold the future of Christianity through the lives of those we help lead to Christ. Your redemption is drawing near. For those people around us, and for that matter, for people all over the world, their redemption is drawing near too. In my classes this week, my professor talked about first and second generation Christians. First generation Christians are people who come to church because they want to go to church. They feel drawn to church and they go to church. They're the first generation in their family to go to church. Second generation Christians are anybody who follows after that, their children and their children and their children. First generation Christians are people who were unchurched and make the decision on their own to go to church. Second generation Christians are those that go to church because their family took them. Our chance to draw first generation Christians, or even people who at one time went to church and then stopped, or anyone else that needs Jesus in their lives, is in the last days. It is the last days to get somebody to come to church and find Jesus. The time for harvesting, the time for evangelism is now. Vance Havner was one of America's most traveled evangelists. He said this: "We have no business living ordinary lives in such extraordinary times." We need to lift up our eyes to heaven in prayer for our country, and we need to lift up our eyes and prayers for the harvest. We need to lift up our eyes to heaven in prayer for all those that don't know that they can do the same. I'm going to take a few minutes right now and just stand here quietly. If anybody, hopefully throughout my message, somebody came to your mind that you think, yeah, they need to go to church, or I need to spend some time with them, helping them discover the love of Jesus. If there's anybody in your mind, I'm just going to take a few minutes right now, just want to pray for anybody. I'm just going to stay in here quietly for a little bit. If anybody would like to say a prayer out loud, and then I'll say a prayer afterwards, and then Bill will play the final song. And if you want to stand, then I'm just going to stand here quietly for a second.